11 years ago, I was shot at least 8 times that we know of in a gunfight in Iraq. Shot head to toe. Body armor, thankfully, took quite a bit of the damage. 2 rounds in the arm. I took a round in the face and almost died. They found me, my teammates saved me and got me onto a medevac helicopter that literally they flew the rotors off, and they got me to the hospital in Baghdad, and they saved my life. Over a 48-hour period, I needed 7 units of blood. The human body only has about 5 units. So I had all my blood transfused and replaced in about a 48-hour period. I got home to the United States and started this incredible journey. And that journey gave me this whole new appreciation, because I realized in that moment that I got a second chance at life. Most people, you only get one shot. You get one shot to go through this life and make the most of it. And most people take it for granted. They get up and they waste so much time. And from that second chance at life and the things that I saw, it suddenly gave me this tremendous perspective to the world around me and the opportunities that were out there. And that's the first thing I want to talk about as a person and as you go through every single day. Every day you wake up is a gift, especially living here in the United States of America. There's so many places in the world where people wake up. When I was in Iraq, when I was in Afghanistan, African countries that I've been to, they do not have the freedom and opportunity that we have here. There's nothing that stops you from getting out and going after your hopes and dreams. The only thing that stops you is you. This morning I worked out at the gym, and before I went in, when I was leaving, the sun was rising, and I was looking across at the prison. And I thought, what an amazing thing and how sad it is. The individuals that are behind those walls, they no longer have free will to go out and do what they want. You guys do. Everyone else here does. So it drives me insane when I walk through the world, and especially when I walk here in the United States of America, and I listen to the negativity for people who are taking for granted the air that they are breathing and the opportunities they have to do something amazing and great. And I will constantly hear a phrase. And now you guys are all fighter jets, so probably none of you have ever used this phrase, but the phrase I hear on a regular basis is, "Oh my God, what a bad day." Anybody use that phrase today? Of course not. You wouldn't dare raise your hands. But I meet so many people that use it on a regular basis. And when I hear it, I'm like, really? Tell me about your bad day. I want to hear it. And I laugh. I'm kind of like, tell me about it. Most people tell me nothing. What they tell me is a scheduled disruption. Their day did not unfold in the manner that they thought it was going to. They thought that their day was going to go this way, and something went wrong. And they allow that to shape their mindset. They allow that to pull them into this negativity. I absolutely despise that phrase. Every day I wake up is a gift. I only have good days and great days. That's it. Because I know I'm still breathing this air. So the very first thing you need to look at is perspective, how you look at the world around you. How every day when you get up, it's up to you to make it a good day or a great day. Surviving that firefight was a little bit of my team. It was a little bit of luck. It was a little bit of a relentless overcome mindset. In order to understand that, though, what I've been blessed to be able to translate is a lot of the military principles that we utilize on the battlefield actually have tremendous correlation to the business environment. The number one thing that enabled me to survive that day in this fierce firefight, calling in the closest fire mission in the entire Iraq war, was the air support up above. You see, for ground forces, Navy SEALs, Rangers, Marines, we can train to the highest level of ground combat. But the great equalizer in any kind of warfare is our aerial assets. We never went anywhere without fighter jets overhead. every time we went into battle, we had fighter jets that were flying that were providing us intelligence. If things went wrong, we were able to call them in and provide close air support. So in order for you guys to understand that, I want you to understand 3 key principles about how we control the air in a battlefield environment, because these principles are going to apply to you. So in aerial warfare, there's 3 levels: air supremacy, air superiority, and air parity. Now, you guys being fighter jets need to understand these terms, because you see, air supremacy means we dominate every aspect of the battle space. That means that everything we do, we know exactly what's going on there. We know the moment when any type of aircraft, drone, anything actually makes entry up into the airspace. And typically, we know it so quickly, we can eliminate it before they ever get into any kind of advantageous position. So imagine, if you will, Google. Google has air supremacy of the search engine that are out there. If you were to come to me and say, I'm thinking about creating a search engine to challenge Google, Google could probably crush you before you ever even got started. They have the assets, they have the resource, they have supremacy of that marketplace. Air superiority is the next level. And this means that we can control the air. We are better than almost anyone out there, but we can't necessarily stop them from getting up at all times. We're better than them. So if they launch an aircraft, we're a fighter jet, and they launch a couple of fighter jets, we're going to take them out. Because our fighter jets, our tactics, everything we do is better than them. So the equivalent is, Fit Body Boot Camp is out there. Somebody else tries to launch a Fit Body Boot Camp someplace else. You have the ability to reduce and eliminate what they're doing just by market pressure, marketing, we're better. This is air superiority. Air parity is when you can only control one small area. So if you're fighting in a specific area, and this is where your base is, basically you control that area. You can put your aircraft up in that area. But if anybody else was to move in that area that has air superiority or air supremacy, they would crush you. You would be gone. This makes all the difference in the world to understand these things, because for you guys as fighter jets, for Fit Body Boot Camp, you should unequivocally be looking at air superiority, and then how do you get to air supremacy? I mean, at the highest level, you're able to dominate on all aspects. What makes the difference in combat? And what makes the difference for fighter jets to come out successful? What makes the difference for Navy SEALs to succeed on the battlefield is pushing what I call margins of performance. So what type of fighter jet are you? If we have an F-35, this is at the top level of fighter jets. If we have an A-10 Warthog, it's kind of at the lower level. It's a badass platform, but it cannot compete with an F-35. In order to get to this highest level, to be an F-35 fighting against some other aircraft that is equivalent, it is how we squeak out what I call margins of performance. Margins of performance are those tiny, incremental, razor-thin areas that allow someone to be better than someone else, even if you put us side by side and you said, on paper, they look roughly the same. It's like 2 fighters, tail of the tape. Their weight's the same, their fighting discipline is the same, their arm span is relatively the same. One of them will win. And then the one that wins typically is the one that squeaks out the margins of performance. The little things that they can do to amplify their strengths and to mitigate their weaknesses. What enabled me to come home that day on the battlefield was my team and I had amplified our margins of performance to the highest level. We had done it through physical leadership. I was literally in the best shape of my life the day I was wounded. I was screening to go to our next level SEAL team, and the doctors told me from the amount of blood I lost, I should not have survived. What saved my life, they unequivocally told me, my fitness. Margins of performance are pushed through our mental leadership. how we absorb information, what we read, what we learn from, who we try and surround ourselves with to gain knowledge to be better. So in those situations, you're ready. You can push that envelope. Emotional leadership, how you manage yourself in all situations, how you prepare yourself for those catastrophic moments so you're not overwhelmed and so you can manage them. Social leadership, who's on your team? Who are the other fighter jets you fly with? That you don't allow some crop duster to sneak its way in, because when the shit hits the fan, he ain't gonna be able to keep up and save you. My teammates stepped up in that firefight and they unequivocally saved my life. And there were rings of teams that saved my life, that social leadership spear I had. It was my teammates. It was the Air Force AC-130 gunship that brought in precision fire missions, the closest fire missions in the entire war. It was the fast mover fighter jet aircraft that were providing reconnaissance, providing intelligence. It was the medevac platform that got me out of there and got me to the Baghdad emergency room and saved my life. And then the innermost ring was my family. It was my wife, it was my kids, it was my friends. The last component is spiritual leadership, how you get outside yourself. Meditation, breathing, religion, whatever you do to recognize there's a much bigger world than you and this little sphere that most of us typically walk around in. That perspective and that leadership on all 5 of those areas makes the difference. This is how you squeak out the margins of performance that make the difference between you and someone else getting ahead and winning. Now, what happens when they get ahead of you? What happens when that critical moment comes along and you get ambushed? So you see, I survived an enemy ambush. They're not designed for you to survive. I spent the majority of my military career as a SEAL learning how to kill or capture the enemy. I learned how to do it in urban warfare, desert warfare, mountain warfare, land warfare operations, close quarters combat, and even in hand-to-hand. When we conducted an ambush, it was designed to be as devastatingly overwhelming as possible. And we would pick a specific location that we would try and channelize the enemy into in this spot and place as much overwhelming firepower on them as possible. So that in the hopes that they would be so overwhelmed that they would just hunker down and not fight back and just pray that maybe they'd survive this vicious onslaught. September 13, 2007, I got to feel the receiving end of that. And it is not a fun position to be in, where you have literally thousands of rounds coming in at you, hitting you, and trying to pin you down. Your teammates are being hit, you're being hit. That point of attack, we have a name for it. We call it the X. For any ambush, it is the direct point of attack, whether you're on it or you're trying to put the enemy on it. In order to survive, there's only one thing you can do. You have to get off the X. And that is what we teach our individuals, and that is what we did that day. My teammates and I fought back. We ended up managing to maneuver somewhat out of the X. We managed to get cover. But the interesting thing is, it is the most critical thing you have to do. You have to get off the X in these moments. And as I moved further and further away from my injuries, I started to realize that everyone out there falls under the X also. They fall into these ambushes also. If you are a fighter jet, there is some other fighter jet out there that may come up into your airspace and target you. And now you're in the X. Who wins? The individual that's able to move the fastest. The individuals that is able to get off that X. So everything you do is critical upon that one principle when catastrophe comes along in your life. Because for me, that military ambush translated into the next phase, which was a life ambush. A life ambush is one of these catastrophic events that can occur that will forever leave a mental, emotional, or physical scar on you. And we all know people that have gone through them. Some of you in this room may have gone through a life ambush. You may be going through a life ambush right now. Divorce, sudden unexpected loss of a job, accident, illness, business catastrophe, life-threatening illness or injury to a family member, sexual trauma, and at the highest level, the unexpected loss of a close loved one. And one of the biggest things I've seen is the unexpected loss of a child. These are life ambushes. These are these moments where we're absolutely overwhelmed. And what I watched and saw the correlation to is so many people in this moment, when they happen, they get stuck on the X. Because I don't know what it is about human beings that when these things happen, we have a natural tendency to not want to get off the X. We get overwhelmed in the moment. It's just too much information and it's devastating. And we hunker down and we just pray that it'll go away, that it'll be over. And the other thing we have a natural tendency to do is turn around and look at the past and say, I want that back. I want back what I've lost. The money, the marriage, the loss, whatever happened. But you can't. It's in the past. We can never go back and change the past. All we can do is shape our futures. People who survive, people who squeak out those margins of performance to be better, they're the ones that get off the X the fastest. They're the ones that recognize in order to survive, in order to be better, in order to drive forward and shape your future, you have to get off the X as quickly as possible. So, it is what enabled me to come home. It is what enabled me in that moment in my recovery to understand I couldn't go back and change things. Because I'll tell you, when I sat in the hospital 3 days after I got back, I'd become known as the overcome guy. And I'd love to tell you that the moment I got home, that I was like, yeah, let's go. I wasn't. I had had the enemy ambush, and suddenly I stepped into this life ambush. I was at the height of my career. After having some major catastrophic failure in leadership several years earlier, I had redeemed myself. I was respected. I had a very successful combat deployment. I was 1 week from going home when that enemy ambush occurred. I was screening to go on to a higher level SEAL team. I had my life, everything laid out. And suddenly I found myself in that hospital bed with doctors standing over me saying, we're going to have to amputate your arm. You're never going to operate again. We don't know if we're going to be able to fix your eye. We don't know if we're going to be able to fix your jaw. I was trached. I had a stomach tube they were feeding me through. I was wired shut. I had no use of this hand. I was so weak from the blood loss, I had to have nurses get me out of the bed to use the bathroom. So I won't lie, the first couple of days I started to feel sorry for myself. I was sitting on the X. But I realized, as I kept looking back at the past saying, I want what I had lost. You know, I want to go back. If only I'd moved left, or if only I'd moved right. If only I'd done this, if only I'd done that. You know, I wouldn't be here in this hospital bed. You know, I'd be ready to go on with my career. And something said, stop. You can't change it. You can't change what happened. You have a beautiful wife. You have 3 young kids. And you have a future. It's up to you to shape it and do something with it. And I don't care if you're walking around leading a business. I don't care if you are working in any field that's out there. If you're a dentist, if you're a policeman, if you're military, leadership is leadership no matter what. And you can lead from any situation, whether it's a hospital bed, whether it's in this room, whether it's out there on the streets or on the battlefield. Because it's your attitude that will determine the outcome. And it was in that moment I said, I'm going to drive forward. I don't care what happens, I'm going to shape my future. I'm going to show my kids that despite the horrible things that happen to us, the life ambushes we incur, it is a choice. It is a choice to decide to be better and more positive and drive forward and be relentless. So as I'm going through this journey and deciding to get off the X, I had some family members that came into the room. And it was the first time my wife had left. She had been by my side literally 24 hours a day for almost 2 weeks, sleeping in a recliner next to my hospital bed. And she decided to go get a cup of coffee. I had 2 family members that were there. She felt comfortable because they were there. And when she left, I started to drift off. And I was in that subconscious state where, you can still kind of hear what people are saying or you hear the TV in the background, but right before you drift into that sleep where you no longer hear anything. And as I was drifting off, I caught their conversation, and their conversation was, what a shame. What a pity. We send these young men and women off to war, and they come home broken and battered, and they'll never be the same. They'll never be a productive member of society. And when they left, this was stewing in my head, this dangerous, demonic, pitiful energy. And it made me angry. And when my wife came back, I said, never again. Because it was in that moment I was like, I am getting off the X and I am never looking back. Movement is life. I am going to move and create action, positive energy and action for myself. And in that moment, I wrote out this sign. And it said, attention to all who enter here. If you're coming into this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds that I received, I got in a job that I love, doing it for people that I love, defending the freedom of a country I deeply love. I'll make a full recovery. What is full? That is the absolute utmost physically I have the ability to recover. Then I will push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense rapid regrowth. If you are not prepared for that, go elsewhere. And we signed it, the management, because I don't know, it made sense at the time. So I told my wife, I said, go put this on the door. And I said, nobody's allowed in this room until they read that. And, my wife and typical spouse faction, when your spouse does something that you're like, you're nuts. She's like, really? And I was like, yes. And she did. And the sign took on a life of its own. Getting off the X, you never know the impact it is going to have, not only on you, but on others around you. It's so natural to want to sit there in these overwhelming situations. And I watch so many people in life that do it. So many people that have had something terrible happen to them, or even something minor that happens to them, and they sit on the X. Our ability to influence, impact, and lead others is on you. And that one moment created a ripple effect that has impacted hundreds of thousands of people. I've had so many people that have reached out to me because of that sign. People with cancer that have said, I can't tell you what your sign did for me, I'll put it on my door. People that have been in severe accidents who have said, I found your sign, I can't tell you what it did for me. I got invited to the White House to meet President Bush because of that sign, and he signed it. And I got asked, well, what are you going to do with it? And I said, you know what? It's not mine. It belongs to the wounded warriors in the hospital. So we had it framed, and it now hangs in the wounded ward at Walter Reed National Medical Center. And what's amazing is the wood on the bottom of the sign is rubbed clean. Because the warriors now, before they go to surgery, they ride by it and they rub it. They rub it for luck. You never know the impact you are going to have by driving forward and by getting off the X. So today, with what I've talked about, I want you to have perspective. I want you to understand that most people in life get one shot I am unique. I am living a second chance. I'm living on life number 2. So I no longer have bad days. I have good days and great days. I know I'm going to push myself to the absolute 100% optimum efficiency I have. I'm going to be the absolute best fighter jet that they can put together that they make. And I will drive forward to achieve air supremacy in the things that I do. And I will do that through those margins of performance. Physical leadership, mental leadership, emotional leadership, social leadership, and spiritual leadership. It will make the difference between me being more successful and somebody else that's not willing to push those razor-thin margins. And lastly, when those bad moments come, and they're coming for all of us, the average human being goes through about 5 life ambushes in their lifetime. It's just part of being human, I hate to tell you. But the question you need to ask yourself is, will you be ready? If you follow the principles that I talk about, you will be. And when that moment comes, you will get off the X and find success. Thank you.